Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Blue Infrastructure webinar hosted by EcoDistricts and Biohabitats. Everybody is in listen-only mode. If you are having trouble hearing me, just send me a message in the chat box if you are on a GoToWebinar on your computer. We're really excited to have you all join us today. My name is Katie Ricciuto, and I'm a program manager with EcoDistricts. And this webinar is the second in a series of 6 webinars this year as part of our new EcoDistricts Institute, which is a program that includes webinars and in-person foundation courses that we host to help you build knowledge and capacity in urban and community development. I'm going to give you a really brief overview of our organization and then turn it over to Pete Munoz and Juan Ravallo of Biohabitats to talk about their work. And throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please post them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A session in the last 15 minutes and field your questions then. So next slide, please. Just waiting for the slides to advance. There we go. Really quickly, I just wanted to thank our Institute sponsor, Delos. They are very kindly sponsoring our entire Institute webinar lineup this year. So thank you very much to that organization. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with EcoDistricts, we are a national nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon. We have staff in several cities across the country. And we work as a national intermediary in a couple of ways. One is by building a community of practice through our neighborhood certification program, individual accredited professional credential, and our professional development events such as this webinar. And then the second way we work is by supporting cities and projects through deeper technical assistance and engagement in what we call our accelerator program. Next slide. Our work is guided by our framework. It's called the EcoDistricts Protocol. It is free and available to download on our website. I'll make sure that you have a link to the page where you can download it after the webinar in case you're interested in learning more. And I really encourage you to download it and check it out. Pete and Juan will talk more about how EcoDistricts and the protocol align a little bit with the work that they do. But for right now, I just want to quickly stress that it's a process-oriented framework, and it's anchored by 3 imperatives that we think are essential to our work: equity, resilience, and climate protection. And there are 6 priorities to help projects achieve meaningful outcomes, and then 3 implementation phases. So this slide gives you a little bit of an understanding of how we see it as everything kind of aligns. Next slide, please. I wanted to quickly share upcoming dates and topics for our webinars, and then dates and locations for our in-person foundation courses. The webinars are free, and the foundation courses are a deeper dive. They're a full-day training to prepare you to become an accredited professional or use the protocol more deeply in your work. Next slide. And so there are a couple other ways that you can engage with us. We have an annual incubator, which is a 3-day training to help teams really accelerate their work in urban and community regeneration. You can participate in our certification program, which is where you can have your neighborhood certified as an eco-district. You can become an accredited professional. We can provide you technical assistance. And then we also have our annual EcoDistrict Summit coming up in November in Pittsburgh. So we'll send you these slides after the webinar, and they have links to where you can find more information on each of these things. Next slide. Okay, so to introduce you really quickly to our Biohabitats presenters, I'm sure they will talk more about what they do in themselves, but Biohabitats has been a really long-term partner of EcoDistricts, and we're really grateful to have them presenting today. Pete Munoz is a senior engineer and practice leader with Biohabitats and has designed hundreds of infrastructure projects. He's also an EcoDistricts instructor and is the author of our Living Infrastructure Guide, which is currently being updated, and a new version will be released later this spring. And Juan Ravallo is a senior ecologist and integrated design specialist with the organization, and he has over 20 years of experience in over 100 ecological and real estate development projects. So basically, we hope you enjoy the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Biohabitats, and then we'll have a Q&A session and provide you with more information on everything at the end of the webinar.
Great. Katie, let me know if the audio fades in or out. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the world. Just wanted to give a quick intro to Biohabitats. Some of you may be familiar with us, but we're a planning, design, engineering firm focused on promoting ecological stewardship and restoring the earth. We work on a wide variety of water infrastructure projects, and that spans a pretty wide spectrum, everything from kind of our natural water infrastructure like our rivers, our wetlands, estuaries, and coastlines, and on one side of the spectrum, and on the other side of the spectrum, more of our built water infrastructure, so stormwater, rainwater, rain harvesting systems. And we take lessons from the natural world in order to inform our design and management systems that we have. We're definitely a specialty water resource firm. I think one thing that's unique about us is we're multidisciplinary, but over half of our technical staff are hard scientists, and that really grounds a lot of our work. And the other half of us are made up of landscape architects, engineers, and other implementation practitioners. We get involved in a lot of different types of projects. You'll see some of those today. We're going to be talking about projects at varying scales in many places across the country and the globe. Our offices are scattered throughout the U.S. We have about 80 professionals that work in varying locations across the North American time zones. And I think with that, we'll jump into a little bit of framing and context. And please bear with us as some of the slides advance. Might be a little slow. We can actually see, what's really cool about the webinar, we can actually see how many people can view the slides as they advance. Technology is amazing. I love this slide for to distinguish EcoDistricts. I don't know if other folks have used this, but really EcoDistricts is the how in a lot of our work. We're often, especially in urban contexts and understanding the green movement and around development and infrastructure, there's lots of certifications that are the what, but EcoDistricts is really the how, and it's a more process-oriented, as Katie mentioned. I know many of you on the attendee list today are very familiar with EcoDistricts, and so it might be familiar, but we're gonna touch on a couple key points just to keep everyone on the same page. And it is really different. It is really a pathway for action. It's looking at the power of the neighborhood and district scale, which is a space of innovation that I think advances the work that we've done at the building scale through LEED and Living Building Challenge and other certification programs that have really developed over the last 2 decades. But is a more nimble scale to work at that's different from city or regional planning. And as Katie mentioned, there's a protocol that looks at different imperatives and priorities and objective categories under that. We're not going to dive deep into those, but we do want to touch on this implementation part, the bottom part of this screen, which is really the process for EcoDistricts. As faculty, some of the challenges that I have in describing this work is going through all the jargon, and so we're going to try to simplify some of it and using the protocol book, a couple pages from the books, to make it really digestible. And so we hope that that is a good way of moving forward. So again, we're going to touch on the second and third steps in the process, which are the formation and roadmap. And I'm going to turn it over to Juan Ravallo to start to unpack some of this.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. From all the complexity that a process like this can have, I want to highlight in the formation phase the ability or the need to create an asset map, understanding assets across not only the economical sphere, but also the social and the physical and organizational assets. So to understand better what we already have in order to make a foundation of the process that we would like to get. And I will touch also in the roadmap in step 1, this phrase, understand the district's setting and location in the community, including who and what will influence successful district outcomes and what goals are to be emphasized. For me, as an ecologist, this phrase actually is describing the process that I usually take in making an assessment of a project. So the setting, it can be the climate, the terrain, the urban ecology. The location can be the relative location of the place, the adjacent areas, the areas of influence. The who are the leaders of the community, the organizations that are over there. And the what are the strategies that will allow us to achieve the outcomes described in the district workbook. And in my process, what I try to do before disclosing the strategies, in this case, I would like to put the priorities, to identify the priorities also aligned with the district, with the eco-district process. So based on that, I would like to share that usually for me the setting, it's a little bit more complex than just a couple of things, understanding where we are and what we have. In ecology, we try to understand a very complex system, and for that, we describe the attributes of the ecosystem in different ways. The physical conditions, the structural diversity, the species composition, what kind of exchanges happen, what kind of threats are there, and what redundancies are present or are absent in order to have our system more resilient. But understanding the setting in the case study, it depends on each location, and I have some examples. So here is Bainbridge Island, the place where I live on. This is the Puget Sound in the northwest. This is the city of Seattle. And Bainbridge, even though it seems to be very rural and very green, is actually home of 24,000 people. The glacier past create a scar in the terrain. You can see all these hills and valleys, and leave all these glacial till in the geology characteristics of the island, which create almost impermeable surface all around the land. And this is a challenge because all these watersheds with all these creeks and wetlands are actually the sole source of groundwater that we have on the island. This is especially important when you see all these people. These are the actual footprint of the construction and on the different buildings of the island, and everybody depends on the groundwater over there. So the groundwater goes, infiltrates mostly through the forests and the green areas that we have over there, and these are the actual recharge areas identified all over the island. We know, as part of our setting analysis, what kind of aquifers we're dealing with. We have 4 aquifers in that place, and some of them are actually above sea level, but 3 of them are actually below the sea level. So one area of concern is not only the water availability, but also, as you all know, the possibility of seawater infiltrating into the aquifer. This is a concern in Bainbridge because all this blue line that you see on the screen is the area that we have service, water service areas from KPUD. And all these little green dots that you see to the right are the private wells that communities and houses depend on for having drinking water. So this setting and this concern trigger in Bainbridge the activities from the city to have tree regulations, critical area ordinances, design guidelines. Right now we have a building moratorium until the design guideline gets set up, water quality assessment in the streams and around the island, study for tertiary treatment, groundwater plans, and all these people here, all these organizations and citizen groups are part of the response of the people in terms of this concern and these features that we have on the island. What I am trying to get to is that the understanding of the settings, understanding of the ecological features, of the geological characteristics, trigger in our community a set of concerns, a set of understanding of the potential risks that trigger a response from the city and from the people to engage in conversations and actually take steps towards addressing our challenges, towards improving our challenges and reducing our risk. Of course, another big risk that we have over there and in all the Northwest is the big one, the big earthquake that it's now overdue of the Juan de Fuca plate in the coastline, but also in Bainbridge, you can see the big Seattle fault that crosses all over the island. You want to say something?
No, I just think it's, Bainbridge Island isn't a certified eco-district, but I think it's really acting as an eco-district with multiple stakeholders, looking at multiple solutions and understanding an appropriate time frame of which they can look at strategies to help improve towards the goals that they're setting.
Right.
Really, that's the roadmap for eco-districts. And so I think that's great. So I wanted to go to share another project that our team out of the Chesapeake Bay Bioregion Office for Biohabitats has been working on. I'm going to do a very light touch on this. I'm excited to say that we're looking at hosting another webinar that's going to highlight this project and a few of other urban ecological assessment and planning projects later in the year. So look to further future eco-district webinars for that. But this is the Baltimore Green Network Plan, and it's, sorry, I'm just getting my notes here. There we go. This is a plan that really looks at some of the blight in our urban areas and the challenges that come with that, and trying to correct some of the imbalance that our urban areas have of immense poverty, health disparity, food deserts, lack of greens and open spaces, and looking at some of our natural infrastructure on ways to improve those. And so, again, just kind of lightly touching on this project. I'm not going to get in detail, but there was a ton of people that were involved in this work, including the team that we led with other consultants, and then a whole host of partners, nonprofits, government agencies, and institutes of learning and the like. So just to quickly mention them, but not in great detail. And really, Baltimore is a city defined by water, developed in the stream valleys that connect to our harbor. And so the development is very much part of the ecological pattern. And there are lots of connections of the ecology of the region that support and move through this very urbanized area. And so part of our analysis is looking at the suitability of this area for different interventions. I mentioned, showed the picture of vacant lots and some of the existing ecological corridors. And when we lay all of these different GIS information on top of each other, we create a heat map and starts to highlight nodes that we want to, that we could potentially work from. These are the kind of the best opportunities to begin looking at an intervention. So with these hotspots, we started to focus on 4 different focus areas within the urban area. I'm not going to get into detail of which one, but part of those engagements were meeting with community and talking about what their needs are, and having a whole host of design charrettes to make connections with folks in the community. And then further suitability analysis is providing additional information on the local economy and community and ecology, and understanding the connections between each. And again, taking multiple layers of information and stacking them on top to be able to make some analysis. And then from that suitability, looking at prioritizing where areas of need are, whether it's, as I mentioned, a community that's in need of more open space, or a community that has poverty issues. How do we start to look at the investments that we're going to make around our community and help support some of those other communities of need? And I've just filtered through some of these. So again, after we take all of the suitability analysis and community engagement work and some of the prioritization, we're creating kind of finalized heat maps to look at where we can identify pilot projects to go in, working with groups that already exist in neighborhoods that are also some of the areas with the greatest need, to look at what projects could really make a difference. And again, working with the community to make that happen. And so I'll finish up this by just sharing a couple photos and renderings of some potential. This is a vacant lot and what was envisioned. Another street corridor and what's envisioned. And again, this is looking at how do we use some of the infrastructure that's needed in terms of ecological infrastructure and water infrastructure, and support other community needs, a whole facet of social and development needs. And this is the last existing conditions and what's possible. And again, if you want more detail on this project, happy to connect you with our folks in Baltimore that worked on this, as well as I mentioned, stay tuned for future webinars to dive deeper into this and other similar projects. And there's also a website you can go to find out more, hosted by the city. And with that, we'll shift it back over to Juan.
Okay, this is a project that I did in the past with my previous company called TOA in Mexico City. So you can see where Mexico City is more or less on the center between the mountains. You can see here all these gray dot is Mexico City, and it's around this mountain range. These are volcanoes around. This is the volcano of Toluca. This is the big volcanoes that surround the city, and this is another volcano to the east. And all this is a metropolitan area of Mexico City, surrounded by mountain and what is left of the forests that are over there. This project, it's about a river that starts up here in the mountains, in the Dinamos it's called, and run very clean and very good water quality until it touches the urban footprint. And then it gets piped and runs more or less into this green dot. And down there is where the project happened. So the river starts all over up here in the mountains and run several kilometers of urban areas until this place, which is daylighted down here. And as you can imagine, I apologize for the quality of those photos, but on the top is very clean and somehow preserved environment with a lot of diversity. And this river, it's actually a remnant of the old rivers that used to feed the ancient lakes in Mexico City. So the city of Mexico was founded in this island called Tenochtitlan, and we have around 18 rivers that used to feed into the basin of what now is Mexico City. The only thing that is left is remnants of Xochimilco and the wetlands that we can still see there in the Chinampas. The river was used for agricultural purposes and orchards, and around the 50s started to be used, or even before, I guess, it started to be used to generate electricity in a paper mill up in the mountains. And as you can see in the picture of the right, later was totally abandoned and polluted. There are some remnants in the city that remind us that the river is flowing in a pipe underneath these areas. These are 16th or 17th century bridges, and there are some remnants of the same bridge that exists and the same little chapel that exists today. But before, the river was clean, and now, as you can see, it's totally dirty, and it's carrying a lot of debris, and it's basically like an open sewer. So with this, and the concern of having a community supported process to having a clean river, a team was formed with the water system of the Mexico City government, the UAM University and others, some neighborhood organizations, and this company called TOA, in which I was before. And we created this linear park with the treatment of the river with a new plant that was going to be built around here. And with clean water, the people was going to be able to remember that the river was flowing over there and being able to access and actually work as a green infrastructure for stormwater management. We created a whole, mostly native species palette to polish the water, to work with the habitat and some wildlife that still remains in the urban ecology, and create a new feature out of a need of having a healthy river. And in some areas where we have a historical remnant, but we couldn't daylight the river, the design still had that feature of remembering that the river was there in order to bring the people together. So the concerns and risks, again, are the water quality, the waste management, the stormwater management, health, and urban ecology, which relate to the priorities placed by EcoDistricts as place, health and well-being, and living infrastructure. Again, a project that starts from a need, from a concern, from a setting of the urban river, bringing people together, academics, government, and neighborhoods to create a new feature and an infrastructure. Another project.
Yeah, so this is an urban project in Portland, Oregon. Many of you may be familiar with it. I'm going to go quickly through this project. This is in the Lloyd EcoDistrict, which is one of the first districts formed out of the organization, and is really led by a lot of commercial tenants and developers in the area, because not so many years ago, most of the area looked like this, with a lot of surface parking, and that's an existing office building on the top left of that super block. Here's another look at it. There we go. Here's another look of what was there and what was created about 5 years ago now. Basically, they went down 3 stories to interconnected parking garage and bike garage, and then went vertical in 3 residential towers with some first floor commercial. And when you look at the, there we go, when you look at the super block and 4 blocks and the surrounding area, a street was reestablished on the east-west grid, and then this north-south spine took over the 60-foot right-of-way of road and turned it to a pedestrian core, but also integrated in stormwater, wastewater, rain harvesting, and a water feature to be part of the pedestrian experience. And then what I'm going to focus on just for the next few slides is this northern portion, which is the wastewater treatment system for the new development. American Assets Trust is the developer, and they put a fabulous design team together, including Turner Construction, GBD Architects, a local landscape architect here in Portland, and a whole host of other folks to really create this integrated, high level of sustainability residential development. This is what that space looks like between the existing office building, see at the top left, and we're standing on one of the new buildings. This is the 60-foot right away. You can see pedestrian access, and it has emergency access. But then all of the vegetation and those red trickling filters there are part of the wastewater system. The system treats 45,000 gallons of black water generated from the new buildings, and then reuses it as toilet flushing in 657 different apartment units, as well as irrigation around the development, and to reduce their non-potable demand on the city. The city was really interested in this development because it didn't tax the capacity of their existing sewer, which would need upgrades, and so the city gave back the developer $1.46 million in SDC credits because of this investment. And what's exciting is it's not something that's hidden in a basement. It's really celebrated and part of the experience. There's a grocery store right on top of this the system that you enter. You can see cafe tables out there, and people enjoying the landscape, not necessarily knowing that they're eating their lunch on their wastewater infrastructure. We did some fun things with it. It has its own Twitter handle, and so it spreads information around the community about some of the sustainability features of the development. But really, this is an integrated solution that has a lot of benefit. It's not just wastewater treatment. It's part of the landscape. It's iconic branding. It produces a non-potable supply for water reuse, but it's also educational, increases biodiversity, and again, is part of the whole placemaking, while allowing emergency access and pedestrian circulation. There's a whole host of other areas where rain is harvested and stormwater is integrated into the development. It's a great example of mixed-use urban development. If you're ever in Portland, it'd be worth checking out. And I think when we're trying to pick decisions for the infrastructure that support our development, we're often trying to understand its first cost and operational cost, but there's a whole host of other parameters that we look at, in developed areas for sure, understanding the footprint, what the energy intensity is, what its relation to ground is, which can often be something we look for maintenance and access, but also some of the externalities, understanding the operational costs, sludge production costs, what are the difficulties depending on the system that you might choose. There's a whole host of ways we look at evaluating these things. I like this table that I think we used in collaboration with a bunch of folks for some .com clients of ours almost a decade ago now, looking at all these different factors and how we might weight them and rank different interventions. And so this is a good tool also to work with the community members on and having them weight different factors that are important to them and understand where different options for treatment or management pop out. So that was an example we wanted to share. I think we have one more that maybe we can go through a little bit quickly to get to questions, because we're at about 12:40 now.
Okay. So the next project is also international, but what we are seeing is that water, it's a transversal topic that not only unifies our concerns or needs, but also when we study a place through the water story, we understand much better how life it's occupying that space and how it was formed and what vulnerabilities are there and what are the opportunities that we can use or leverage to improve our places and neighborhoods. So this is a project in Belize, specifically in the town of San Pedro that you can see to the right. San Pedro was formed as a key. It's not an island. I mean, it is considered an island because it's separated from mainland, but it's a key. It means that it was formed by different processes at the islands. And this little fishing town grew into a medium-sized city that you can see to the right, occupying what was before mangroves and marshes. The Great Mesoamerican Reef, you can see it to the right, is one of the special features of San Pedro that sustains all the fisheries and all the tourism activities that happen over there. To the left, you can see the current wastewater treatment that San Pedro town has, which is a point of vulnerability, I would say. And you can see the development to the right, occupying the small pieces of reclaimed land that was once all mangrove growth. So the channel that you see in the photo to the right actually looks like this. It's a shallow water with sea grasses underneath and mangrove growing to both sides. This is one very important feature of the formation of these areas, because the formation of the keys, and you can see over there ambergris key in the lower image, is part of a very old coral reef system formed in the Pleistocene that was shift and moved, creating these very thin reefs of stone that start accreting some sediment through the process later on with the mangrove activity and the sea grasses. And this is important because the soil that we have over there reflects the origin and formation of these areas. After thousands of years of mangrove activity and seagrasses and sea marshes, enough soil is accumulated to be able to host other plants and other animals above the grayish anaerobic substrate that was formed in the water. All this area has a dynamic interchange with the coral reef barrier, which is the main sustenance of all the people in that area of San Pedro. So this place is fantastic. It's full of natural beauty, and the people over there, it's also amazing. They are very, very friendly. They have a beautiful place, and they know it. And they understand the vulnerability of it. So even though this is a very tourist area, they decided that only golf carts, electrical carts, was going to be there many years ago. But later through the years, they tweaked the electrical cars and put a little gasoline engine over there. So you have now electrical cars with gasoline motors. That it's actually very interesting. But these people are they know what they have and they value it very, very well. And they are very concerned of the development that they don't want. And they are very active on bringing together different expertise. So the captain of this boat, Mr. Roger, he's a traditional fisherman. He's an artisanal fisherman with a load of direct knowledge of being in that place, living from the water and the land for many, many years and generations. And to the left, you see biologist, my friend Valentin Rosado. He is a grassroots consultant. He's very concerned of education, of environmental issues, of sustainability, of development, and he's very, very in touch of both the academic and the people on the grassroots base. And the lady you see sitting down in the front, it's another good friend of mine, Kaila. She's a biologist from Belize, and now she's finishing a master degree on forestry on the University of Yale. So these are the leaders or representative of the leaders of the community. And the community is organized in associations and organizations that deal with tourism and fisheries and reef, hotel industry, restaurants, and they are very well organized. They are very, very active. They attend meetings and they are very, very strongly spoken when they don't agree with something. And out of this setting, understanding some challenges, the whole community has this strong effort of doing things better, which align totally with EcoDistricts. Some of the challenges are bad development that you can see in the left, destroying the mangroves and dredging the channels. And of course, trash and plastic, ocean plastic that we know that it's a problem worldwide. In this shoreline, I found trash from Miami and from Guatemala and from Mexico and from other places in the Caribbean that gets washed in Belize. And of course, unregulated development. It's a big, big challenge in some areas of this place. You can see in the right, the house is built in stilts, understanding that that place floods, understanding the setting, that it was a mangrove place. The storm surges in hurricane season can go all the way up here, and whoever built that little house understand this and build it on top of it. The big problem is the little concrete box that you see to the right, connected with a PVC pipe to the restroom on the house. So this area will definitely benefit from having a community regulation of integrated water strategies to deal with that, because the waters on the reef and on the channels around and the lagoon are starting to show alarming levels of fecal coliform bacteria. The shoreline erosion is not a theory in this place. In the Caribbean and the small islands, it's a reality that the shoreline is receding as we speak. We are losing land as we speak. Climate change and sea level rise is not a theory that will happen 100 years from now. They are dealing with that, and this part of the concern that is bringing people together, trying to improve the conditions of their neighborhood, of their town, working with private entities, in this case with a private developer, and involving, integrating the efforts from the private sector with the government, with the community, in a understanding that that's the only way that something at this scale can actually happen and actually can protect this treasure of piece of land in the world. And I believe that this is just an example of the same things happening in many, many other places. And again, all these concerns and risks that people identify on the characteristics and attributes of their own site, and how they tie to the priority points that the EcoDistrict framework invites to use. For this specific project, with the help of different entities, we designed a structure called the Mangrove-rama, that it's a structure that has a passive system working with activities of mangroves that provides coastal protection, harvest sand instead of mining sand, using the natural currents in that area, at the same time that creates habitat and promotes the seagrass propagation and others. So I want to go back to the phrase of the step one in the roadmap, understanding the setting, understanding the location is the number one step. Making an asset map of who are the leaders in that place, the local knowledge, the organizations that are already in place, understanding what are the features and the concerns and risks of that community, identifying the priorities that are feasible to work with or are attainable in the short, medium term, and others in the long one, and then defining what strategies are going to be used to address this challenge. So if from all this talk we only remember setting, location, features, leaders, priorities, and strategies, that's a very good result for us.
That's right. And just to finish up a couple of housekeeping items, we partnered with EcoDistricts in 2015 to produce this living infrastructure guide as a quick guide for folks grappling with the living infrastructure priority area and how to think about it within a different context. We're in the process of updating that, so stay tuned for more information on that. If you want to get involved, you can please feel free to give me a call. And just lastly, Biohabitats are part of these organizations, and so we always like to give a shout out to them. The Living Future Institute for their Just label, 1% for the planet, and Biohabitats is a certified B corporation. And with that, we'd love to open up some questions. I think we've got about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes left for some questions. And I think, Katie, were you going to help field some of those?
Yeah, so we've got some questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many as possible in the next 10 minutes. So I wanted to start with a question about, especially with the urban projects that you talked about. Somebody asked, are these projects taking a district stormwater approach so that stormwater is being directed to specific parcels and allowing greater density on other parcels? are they being designed, and are they being designed to alleviate flooding?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Certainly, urban areas in the East Coast have that were developed along those stream corridors and rivers that I mentioned. A lot of them are looking at district approaches and really understanding how the riparian area can be part of a district solution, expanding the floodplain in order to help protect our urban investments is a strategy. One thing that I'm really excited about is cities farther west are starting to look at district approaches. Two worth mentioning maybe the city of Minneapolis. A lot of the urban development is looking at a district stormwater approach and how to have creative decentralized infrastructure that supports urban development. And then the Resilient by Design competition that was in San Francisco, looking at 10 sites around the San Francisco Bay. A lot of them were looking at district's approach of stormwater as well as wastewater and sea level rise infrastructure.
Great. And we actually got a follow-up question. Are any of these projects incorporating any incentives directly to residents to mitigate stormwater impacts?
That's a great question. I don't know about specific incentives to residents. I think a lot of the new development as part of the design of that work is creating something that is really desirable for different populations, and so I think you're seeing this. I think you're seeing integrated solutions from that motivation, not necessarily from individual residents.
Yeah, in the Mexico City case, the neighbors, some were resistant to the idea of a new thing happening in their street, but some others, they really desired to have that river clean, and it is a health hazard over there, so they were very supportive.
Great. Another question is are stormwater management strategies to move water more rapidly, or in your work, do you consider slowing down water since it is becoming a limited resource?
Well, I mean, and that's a great question, because we tend to think that the idea is always like to retain and infiltrate. And that's true in many places, but again, we need to go back to the understanding of the settings. Because in some areas, the infiltration is so slow that not necessarily you want to retain it. I mean, usually, yes, you want to stop the speed of the storm water, but you need to understand where you are and what is possible in doing that.
Yeah, I think I have a longer story, so maybe we'll stop there and go to another question.
Okay. Have any of the projects you mentioned, or any that you have knowledge of, involved community benefits agreements or something similar aimed at mitigating displacement pressures?
Eliminating what pressures?
Displacement, like displacement.
Displacement pressures.
Yeah.
Well, in some projects, in the projects, for example, that I mentioned in Belize or in Mexico, the idea of working with the neighbors is not for them being able to sell and go away. It's actually for improving their own sites. It's a big challenge, because when investments start to flow and the prices of housing start to rise, the affordability of those areas start to diminish. And we are looking at that problem all around the world, I think, especially here in the West Coast, is very clearly. But there's also the possibility, when working with local organizations, to understand that the assets are also the people living there, and the opportunity of doing one of these projects can also give rise to new business models that can actually support the local people and being able to participate in the new investment of the site.
Yeah, one of the projects that we've been working on with EcoDistricts is actually in Johannesburg, South Africa, with the Uxley River, which is right in the middle of Johannesburg and is the headwaters of one of the major waterways. And there's a lot of fear around restoring this river and displacing the folks that are there. And so there's been a special attention in involving community at the grassroots level to understand, again, what, like Juan said, the value of the people that are there and how they can both participate and lead the revitalization of their community for themselves and not for others.
Right.
Great, thank you. We are almost at time. And so I just want to make sure we respect everybody's time and let everybody go at 1 o'clock, at least Pacific Coast time. So Juan and Pete, did you have anything final you wanted to say to the group?
Just to remind everyone that I think this was recorded and will be available to people that that attended. We're really happy that you chose to spend an hour out of your day listening to us. Happy to follow up with folks on other questions afterward. Really appreciate everyone's time.
And thank you, EcoDistricts, for organizing, and I hope this was useful for you guys. Thank you.
This was wonderful. Thank you, Pete and Juan, so much for joining us, and thank you to everybody who joined us today. We will distribute the recording and the slides and contact information to everybody who registered after the webinar ends, and feel free to reach out to me, Katie, with any questions around EcoDistricts, and Pete and Juan about questions on biohabitats and their work. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.